So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Virtual Ocean Dialogues. My name is David Navarro, and I'm the moderator for this session. The event is hosted by the Friends of Ocean Action and the World Economic Forum. It's the first ever completely virtual global ocean event. The dialogues are bringing together leaders from business, governments, civil society, and the scientific community from around the world. And they've been created for the purpose of scaling and sharing innovations and solutions. The purpose is to accelerate benefits worldwide, and the outcomes from the virtual ocean dialogues will be presented to the hosts and organizers of the UN Ocean Conference to be held in due course in Lisbon, Portugal. Now, I'd like to start, if I may, by introducing a video message from Her Excellency, the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina.
Distinguished co-chairs of the Friends of Ocean Action, Managing Director, Platform for Global Goods, World Economic Forum, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning to you all. I thank the organizers for arranging this virtual ocean dialogue and inviting me to share a few thoughts on these important subjects. We are meeting at a time when the entire world is battling the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic makes us rethink the linkage between the health of the ocean and the health of humankind, as ocean offers a great source to combat illness. The ocean contributes to a wide range of goals of the Agenda 2030, from poverty eradication, food security, and climate change to the provision of energy, employment, creation, and improved health. Implementation of Goal 14 of Agenda 2030 is, therefore, more critical now than ever. According to the Global Nutrition Report 2020, almost a quarter of all children under 5 years of age are stunted. A healthy ocean is a vast source of food and nutrition. Oceans can provide 6 times more food than it does today and help meet the nutrition supply. On the other hand, there is already considerable pressure on land and oceanic ecosystems. The impact of climate change on fish stocks is also a serious concern. So, we have to strike the critical balance of sustainability. Bangladesh has achieved remarkable success in ensuring food security for its nearly 165 million people. Improved nutrition and safe food production is our priority. Our National Nutrition Program NNP aims to improve the nutritional status of all citizens, especially of adolescent girls, pregnant women, and lactating mothers. Due to our efforts, proportion of under 5 moderately or severely stunted children has reduced. Bangladesh is the fourth largest inland water fish producer globally. Fish accounts for more than half of our animal source protein. 17 million people, including 1.4 million women in Bangladesh, depend on the fisheries sector for livelihood. Fish production has increased over the years considerably, and our efforts continue to increase fish production. Yet, due to urbanization, inland water bodies are shrinking, so we are prioritizing marine fisheries as part of our Blue Economy initiative. During the 2017 Ocean Conference, we made some voluntary commitments. We have taken legislative measures to protect and conserve the fishery resources and the environment from all types of pollution, including plastic debris. For sustainable use of ocean and other aquatic sources, we need increased international cooperation, especially in securing technology and market access for our resources and products. To that end, I propose the following actions. Number one, assist developing countries with critically required resources, capabilities, and technologies for leveraging full potential of marine resources. Number two, conduct joint research on fisheries development with a view to significantly increasing regional fish production and eliminating illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. Number three, initiate mapping and management of resource identification and critical coastal habitat and biodiversity protection. Ocean action is critical to nourishing our future generations. Let us join hands to renew our commitment for ocean action. I thank you all.
Thank you very much indeed. What a great video address to set us off here from Her Excellency the Prime Minister, linking together health of ocean and health of people, identifying the importance of the Sustainable Development Goal number 14, talking about the potential of the ocean, but at the same time, the importance of ocean stewardship, Bangladesh's blue economy, so wonderful to see. And then these three recommendations for resources and technology related to the ocean for developing countries, development of fisheries, but in the proper way, and then identification and protection of key resources. Wonderful. I wish we could all clap. Thank you very much indeed, Your Excellency. Now we've got a second video message from another of my personal heroes, Dr. Chu Dong-yu, who is the Director General of the Food and Agriculture Organization. So if all works well, we will have another presentation starting now.
Your Excellencies, Isabella Lövi, Deputy Prime Minister of Sweden, Honorable Ministers, Mr. Peter Thompson, UN Secretary-General Special Envoy for the Ocean, ladies and gentlemen. I congratulate the World Economic Forum and Friends of Ocean Action for the organizing this event. We all know that already before the COVID-19 pandemic, providing nutritional food for billions of people was an enormous challenge. COVID-19 inflicted terrible losses, both in lives and to the economy, and poses new global challenges. But there are also lessons to be learned on how to make food system more robust and resilient in the future. We are heading towards a new normal for the time after the pandemic. In this way, as the Chinese proverb says, there may be fortune in the misfortune. On the ocean's role in feeding future generations, I would like to make the three important points. The special role of aquatic food in nutritional and health diets, the role of the innovation and the technology, and the potential of marine aquaculture. On the first point, fish and aquatic foods are truly natural superfood. They are an essential part of the sustainable healthy diet, providing important fatty acids, micronutrients, animal protein in bioavailable form. They are often more accessible and affordable than many other animal source foods in developing countries, especially in small island developing states. The second point, new technologies and innovation are the way forward. Over the last few months, we have all learned to operate and communicate in new ways. Thanks to the technology, FAO is taking big steps to become a truly digital organization. In this way, innovation is changing the way fisheries are managed and operated. Stock assessment, control, and surveillance are improved through the use of satellites and new systems for electronic monitoring. The innovative cold chain technology is helping producers, processors, and value chain operators improve quality, reduce the waste, and get a better return for their products. Digitalization is revolutionizing trade and sales with the creation of new electronic platforms. Traceability has become an important tool ensuring food safety and legality of origin. To improve information flows for business operators as well as consumers. The third and final point, marine aquaculture is vital in the future. Aquaculture already provides more than half of all aquatic products consumed by the human being. Although this also includes freshwater aquaculture, the role of marine aquaculture in future food supply is fundamental. Marine aquaculture includes seaweed, presents a huge potential and a real hub for future. Progress in a number of areas could be a game changer. Genetic selection, breeding and feed technology, farming of new species, development of advanced equipment, production and operations control, and logistics. Ladies and gentlemen, 25 years ago, the world community met in Rome to adopt the FAO Code of Conduct for Responsible Fisheries. Since then, we have been seeing the enormous change in the sector and great progress. The average per capita consumption has increased to more than 20 kilos today, despite rapid population growth. Many challenges remain, but I'm confident that we can overcome this together. Through joint efforts by developing new knowledge and by sharing lessons learned. We will do this through the FAO Hand-in-Hand initiative. This is the evidence-based country-led and country-owned matchmaking initiative. It helps eradicate poverty and hunger by accelerating agricultural transformation and sustainable rural development. Using advanced geospatial modeling and analytics, we identify the most effective interventions in the most needed countries. I invite you all to join this initiative. Let us work together, learn together, and contribute together. I wish you a successful meeting and fruitful deliberations. Thank you.
Oh, Dr. Chu Dong-yu, thank you for really setting out the potential of the ocean to contribute to nutrition, the wonderful contribution of aquatic food to nutrition and health, the potential for innovation and technology, and the promise of increasing aquaculture. So now, with these two fabulous starting messages, we move into the discussion part of our meeting today. And so I'd like to welcome four panelists. Let me just briefly introduce them to you. Professor Rosamund Naylor, William Wrigley Professor of Earth Systems Science, Founding Director of the Center on Food Security and the Environment at Stanford University. And then Shakuntala Thilsted, Research Program Leader, Value Chains and Nutrition at World Fish. And then Audrey Lem, the Deputy Director of the Policy and Resources Division in the Fisheries and Aquaculture Department of the Food and Agriculture Organization. With the fourth, Giles Bolton, Responsible Sourcing Director at Tesco. Now, we're going to hear from panelists in a minute. Each will be invited to present for 5 minutes, and then we will have a period for questions and answers. And if you'd like to submit questions, you can do this through Slido throughout the session. And some of these will be answered. We'll do as many as we can. So you can see here on the slide the QR code that we ask you to scan on your smartphone. Now I'm going to start the discussion. I'm going to go first to Rosamund Naylor. Rosamund, in your view, what is the role of the ocean in nourishing billions? And I'm going to say a bit more because I'm really keen to hear some detail from you. What do we need to know to make better decisions on how to use the oceans for food? And in particular, what do we need to know to ensure that oceans are used in a sustainable and equitable manner so as to improve the nutrition of people throughout the world in line with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development? Professor Rosamund Naylor, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, David. Everyone can hear me. It's really an honor to be part of this panel and indeed part of the virtual ocean dialogues, especially with such an esteemed panel members. You've asked about the importance of the oceans in nourishing billions, and the data have been shown in some of these introductory slides. Roughly 1 in 5 people in the world depend on fish as a really key source of proteins in their diet, as well as many micronutrients, vitamins, and so forth. And I will let my panel colleague, Shakuntala Thilsted, fill out some of those details. But I want to say, as I've worked around the world, for example, in East Africa, there's a saying that fish are rich food for poor people. And I...
Me just for a second. Could you move your microphone just a bit further away from your mouth because you're it's popping a bit. Back to you.
Okay, is this better? Okay. Yeah, you know, fish are also often considered rich food for poor people, but I would say fish are rich food for all people around the world. And when we look at our global food system today, where our diets are filled with sugar, starch, fats, and so forth, fish are really an important healthy dietary choice. So when we look at oceans and their role in nourishing billions, of course, we've been using the oceans forever. You know, we've been fishing the oceans. Fish are incredibly abundant, quickly reproducing resource, a renewable food resource for us. And as we've seen as a result of that, we've had a lot of overfishing over many generations, and new types of incentives and fishery management approaches have come in as a result. Different, individual quota systems and territorial use systems and so forth. And of course, aquaculture has also become a dominant form of fish production, as has been mentioned. I work a lot in the aquaculture space. Aquaculture is now producing over half the fish that are available for human consumption. And many of these systems are sustainable. We might think about clams and oysters, for example, but many also have sustainability challenges. They rely on wild fish for inputs in feeds, or they use antibiotics or create habitat changes in the oceans. So there's a lot of attention that needs to be directed towards sustainability in both capture fisheries and aquaculture. But again, a lot of innovations, amazing innovations in feed alternatives in aquaculture, or the types of systems, on land recirculating systems, offshore systems. So we can talk about those. But I think the main point I want to mention is that there's an incredible diversity of systems in both capture and aquaculture. Over thousands of species are either caught or farmed in different infrastructures and different scales with different supply chains and different technologies. Many of these are small scale in nature and contribute to livelihoods, and many are industrial scale in nature. So generalizations when we talk about the environment or equity or nutrition really can be very misleading, and we do need a lot more science to understand the role of the oceans in actually nourishing billions. And who actually produces the fish and who eats the fish is another issue, because in many of the poorest populations around the world where micronutrients are most heavily needed, those fish are taken off by industrial fleets. So I want to just put in context oceans in the food system as a whole. I work in all aspects of the food system: crops, livestock, aquaculture, fisheries, in all different parts of the world. And I've been amazed at how two different communities have really arose. The community that focuses on ocean management and ocean resources we're talking to today, and those that focus on the global food system, which is many people just focused on terrestrial system, don't even acknowledge fish in the global food system. And yet when we go to the grocery store or to the market, we obviously see fish, beef, pork, chicken, all in the same area. We have options to buy vegetables. You know, how do we make our choices? And what does it mean actually for the future of the oceans? There are many people that said we should just have an end to meat, to beef, because of its greenhouse gases and because of its unhealthy aspects of heart disease and so forth. But if we switched everyone to eating fish, can the oceans actually sustainably manage that demand? And so looking at the demand side is incredibly important. And looking at the linkages between terrestrial and ocean systems is also important. Wild fish are used in feeds, not just for aquaculture, but also for livestock. Aquaculture also relies on crops for feed. And as we know, as we grow crops in terrestrial systems, we get nutrient runoff that creates dead zones, hypoxia that affects fisheries and affects aquaculture. We may think we can have large mollusk or seaweed systems to absorb all this, but those need to be very large scale in system and may have other unintended consequences. So pulling all this together, what we need to know is a lot of details to actually make sure we're doing things sustainably and equitably with the best nutrition. I'm co-chairing a Blue Food Assessment with a colleague, Beatrice Krona from the Stockholm Resilience Center, and Beatrice will speak in the next session. Stanford and the Stockholm Research Center are leading the Blue Food Assessment, which is really an international effort engaging dozens of international experts, including Shakuntala, who's on this panel, to really do a very deep dive into what we know about aquatic foods in this global food system, the environmental impacts, the nutrition, the equity, justice, and so forth. And we have two goals I'll just put up on the table quickly. One is to really understand and fill gaps in our knowledge. And second, to take that science into the policy process and into practice so that we have a real impact. And these scientific papers are unrolling now. Our goal is to be able to use them in the UN Global Food System Conference in 2021. I can talk more about the Blue Food Assessment later, but I think it's really time to have a major international scientific effort so that we really understand oceans and the future of food. Thank you, David.
Oh, thank you, Rosamond. Another big clap to you for just covering such a lot of material in a short time. Really grateful to you. And for the last bit where you told us about the Blue Food Assessment. And that's really a very good segue to our next presenter. Shakuntala Thill said, as I said, she's a research program leader at World Fish. And Shakuntala, I'm going to ask you, what is your take on the role of the ocean in nourishing billions? Could you build off what Rosamund's talked about and think and share with us your views on the expansion of aquaculture to meet the world's growing demand for protein and micronutrients? And indeed, could you tell us what should we be thinking about the role of aquaculture? Perhaps a bit of reset of our thinking about it. And over to you now to give us your thoughts.
Thank you, David. And thank you for having me on this session. And thanks to all the participants who are listening in. Firstly, we use the word oceans as in these sessions. However, I would like from the beginning to make the point that we should be talking about oceans, the sea, and we should also be talking about inland water bodies. As we heard from the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, inland water bodies are an extremely important part of the aquaculture and fisheries of many nations. Also, if you go to Africa and the Great Lakes of Africa, for example. With respect to why it is so important for nourishing the billions, this, as many have said before me, this has always been there. The oceans, the inland water bodies have always been there as a source of valuable foods. What is now very much up on the agenda is the role of aquatic foods as irreplaceable foods for healthy and nutritious diets. Of course, we know that there are certain population groups where it's not culturally acceptable to eat fish, but for many parts of the world, fish is a common part of the diet, and having fish, more fish and more aquatic foods mean that you can get a more diverse diet and a more nutritious diet. So on the plate of food that people eat, I would like to see that there is some space and perhaps even more space given to aquatic foods. In this way, we'll be able to reach quite far in nourishing the billions, and especially the poor and vulnerable population groups. If we should talk about the role of aquaculture, as you asked me to talk about, again here I'd like to talk about the role of inland water bodies and also of the oceans. And if I would begin with inland water bodies, and again using the example of Bangladesh, as we heard from the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, inland water bodies are extremely important also for aquaculture. Take Bangladesh, where you have wetlands, and in seasons, these wetlands are inundated and can be used for fish production. And then in the dry season, it can be used for growing crops, rice and vegetables. So therefore, we must not forget inland water bodies in trying to get more fish and more aquatic foods on the plates of people, especially the poor and the vulnerable. One point that I'd like to make with respect to the combination of growing more aquatic foods and healthy and nutritious diets is that in order to get this linkage, we must have production of diverse aquatic foods. We must move away from, as we started in the 60s with monoculture of crops and monoculture of staple crops, and do not use that approach with respect to where we want to go today with diverse, nutritious foods. And the same holds true for fisheries and for aquaculture. So a fundament of nutritious foods is diverse foods. And that holds true also within aquatic foods.
Thank you very, very much indeed, Shakuntala Tilsted. I hope I've not interrupted you while you were still talking. I think I'd just like to really express gratitude to you for focusing on the potential of inland water bodies, the importance of diversity, and the way in which expansion of aquaculture in inland water bodies can have such a good impact on nutritional outcomes. It's so important, isn't it, just to keep making that point like a regular drumbeat, and that's what you and World Fish have been doing so well. I really appreciate it. I'd now like to go to our third panelist, and Alden Lem. Alden, here's the question that I want to put to you. The FAO is about to release its latest State of the World's Fisheries and Aquaculture report. What are the insights that you can share with us about the role that aquatic food plays in food security? Which are the regions which are most dependent? And then perhaps you could go further and talk a bit about some of the targets under SDG 14, the Life Underwater Sustainable Development Goal, that are just about to mature, as it's called, particularly ways in which the targets under that goal can contribute to zero hunger, and actually blue food more generally can get embedded into the larger food and nutrition conversation. 5 minutes time, starting now. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, thank you, David, and thank you for those encouraging questions. As you rightly said, Sophia, the State of World Fisheries and Aquaculture, which was the FAO's flagship report on fisheries and aquaculture, will be launched next Monday. And it brings us mostly good news. Good news in the sense that world production is increasing, both from capture fisheries and from aquaculture, to almost 180 million tons combined. That's figures from 2018, meaning that human consumption of fish and fishery products is increasing, and it's reached now more than 20 kilos, 20.5. But as you alluded to, there are very large regional differences. There are differences among countries, among regions.
No problem. That was me trying to get a signal correct, but it was not addressed to you. Thank you very much.
Okay, very good. Okay, so there are very large regional differences in consumption. Of course, some countries, especially small island developing states, have very high per capita consumption, such as Maldives and other, more than 100 kilos per year. Other countries, landlocked, inland, mountainous countries, Afghanistan, Ethiopia, and others, consume just a few kilos per year. What is encouraging, though, is that in developing countries in general, developing countries, consumption is increasing. And this includes both least developed countries and low-income food deficit countries. So that is very encouraging from a nutritional point of view. However, Africa, consumption in Africa is less than 10 kilos per year. And this is worrying, both because it is low in itself, but also because it's declining because of very strong population growth. Africa, however, has a very large potential for agriculture production, and in FAO we have a number of programs and activities assisting, supporting countries in Africa in their aquaculture development. One example, for example, is Egypt, which in 10 years has trebled its annual production from aquaculture to more than almost 1.4 million tons. I'd also like to mention some news regarding trade. The importance of developing countries, not just in exports, but in imports, is increasing. And in fact, 49% of all fish that is imported in volume is now imported by developing countries. And that shows again the role of consumption and demand in countries in general, but also specifically now in developing countries. And this again, also in Africa, provides incentives for domestic national aquaculture production. So overall, despite the challenges we see, there is much progress, much potential, not the least thanks to new technology and innovation, both in aquaculture and fisheries management, supply chain management, processing, and distribution. And if we move to your question regarding the SDGs 14 in particular, in FAO, we are the custodian agency for 4 of the indicators under SDG 14. So we are following those very closely. Of course, there's one dealing with subsidies, which is handled by the WTO, but the others are really responsibility directly of the countries themselves or by regional fisheries management organizations. And of course, one of the targets is related to stocks, the state of stocks. And although the trend is not positive on the state of stocks, we must say, however, that there are a number of examples where there's good news. Good news thanks to effective fisheries management, where countries have taken action, addressed the issue, and improved the state of stocks. One very good example is the tuna sector. In just over 2 or 3 years, there's been a very sharp increase in the sustainability of the world's tuna stocks, showing that by concerted action, collaboration, cooperation, it is possible to turn the situation around. Related to how we can improve the role of fish and fisheries products in the overall debate, I think, first of all, we in the sector itself has to engage in the wider food security, livelihood debate, and not just debate among ourselves. We have to reach out and ensure that fisheries are addressed in all contexts that are relevant for the sector. And I think there are at least 3 reasons why I'm thinking that we are on the right way. First of all, that fish is a very unique nutritional values. The second is the role of aquaculture that we have alluded to, and the tremendous growth potential in terms of increasing aquaculture, both marine and inland, over the next couple of decades. And the third is the new focus on the ocean in general and the potential to produce more food. This includes aquaculture, new species, plants, algae, etc., but also the recovery of fish stocks. And I mentioned the great potential of recovery of many fish stocks by improved and more effective fisheries management. So I think overall, this shows that fish is part of the solution and cannot and should not be ignored. And there are many reasons to be optimistic about the future.
Great. Thank you very, very, very much indeed, Alden, because you told us the challenge, you told us of potential, and then you came out with some fabulous examples of progress based on the report, with some good country examples, and then led us forward with 3 ideas for the future. Thanks again. And now I'd like to come to Giles Bolton. Giles, just to give you a little bit of orientation, but then to give you fullest opportunity to speak, what is your take on aquaculture? You know, your focusing is very much on the importance of tackling illegal, unregulated and unreported fishing. That's what you're doing in Tesco, I know, but I want you also to get into the aquaculture part and generally talk about sustainable fishing from the perspective of a major retailer who's made big steps to move forward in this direction. Giles, you have the floor now.
Thank you, David. And it's a great session. Thank you to the other panelists.
You might come closer to your mic, Giles. Sorry about
that. You can get my face large as well. Right, hopefully you can hear me. Look, I just want to paint it in the bigger context to be able to answer your question, David. So our starting point in Tesco is a recognition that the whole of the food industry is going to have to change radically over the next 10 years or so. You know, at the moment, the food industry is the biggest contributor as a whole to biodiversity loss, 60 to 70%. It's going to be by 2030, maybe 2040, the biggest contributor to climate change as the energy industry changes. we're already consuming so many of the planet's resources unsustainably, and we're going to grow the world's population from around 7, nearly 8 billion now up to 10 billion or so by 2050. So this industry has to change. And when you look at where that growth is going to come from in a sustainable way, aquaculture is extraordinarily interesting, because we're going to have to see a lot of growth into plant-based protein. And you can see that trend already starting. But of animal protein, really aquaculture, we think, has the greatest potential. The greenhouse gas emissions to do with so much meat production, the deforestation linked to so much poultry production, are very difficult to see how you can scale up. And in fact, some of those may need to scale down. But with aquaculture, if we can get it right, its potential is fantastic. The challenge for all of us here is that we are some way off. Although there's positive momentum, we are some way off getting this to the right place. So while many of us have focused for a number of years, and in supermarkets like mine, on making sure that the wild fish we sell is from a sustainable source, still too much of the feed which goes into aquaculture is not from a sustainable source, and it's coming from those same wild fisheries as other products. So we have to go harder and faster with innovation. We have some of our suppliers doing very exciting things others have referred to. So looking at getting algae from algal oil to produce omega-3 instead of needing so much fish. Looking at insect protein to go into fish feed rather than, again, using ground up fish. But we also need to see a really significant amount of progress in the global governance of the waters. So you mentioned illegal unreported fishing. You know, for us, that means we have to get to complete transparency in our fishing and our supply chains. But we also need to see much greater global governance of the high seas. And it's frustrating that we're not making more progress. You know, tuna's been referenced. There is some progress, but it's a great example for lay people like me on where you need global governance. It's a really migratory fish. And unless we have people joining up, we won't get the level of production we need in the future. If you look at pelagics in the Northeast Atlantic, there simply isn't enough common governance to make sure that that's going onto a sustainable footing, whether it's for our wild catch fishing or indeed for the feed that goes in. So from a corporate point of view, we think our role is in insisting on transparency, on trying to collaborate with others in the private sector to bring a clearer voice on behalf of our customers, whether it's through things like the Global Tuna Alliance or the Pelagics Group we've helped establish. But we absolutely want to see stronger global governance. And when you go back to where I started, which is where is the world going to get its additional feed from on a way that will stop us damaging the planet across all types of food production, this is the most fantastic opportunity, but we have an awful long way to go to get this onto a truly sustainable path.
Brilliant. Just what I was thinking while you were talking, are others following your lead? And you answered in a way by stressing the importance of collaboration. Am I right that you are bringing others along with you?
I think, look, there are a number of people who I think are taking this very seriously and know more than us in some areas, certainly. What I would say is that I think the collaboration, if you think of the stakeholders involved with governance of the seas, the private sector has tended not in the past, I think, to bring and particularly the retail sector, not bring a strong enough voice of what it needs for its own sustainability and what it needs on behalf of its customers. It is governments who have the tools with which to regulate this and to reach agreements. They need to hear strongly from the private sector players that we want that. Because clearly the voice of environmentalism has not been strong enough through no fault of environmentalists in the past. I think the business lobby needs to bring that more clearly. We all lose in the long term if we don't join up here.
Thank you. That's so important. And thank you very much for stressing sustainable all through, intergovernmental collaboration. And this is the area with such a lot of opportunity. we've got some questions that have come through now for you, fabulous panelists. And, you know, although we're on Zoom, I want to try to keep it quite exciting and fast moving. So you won't mind, I hope, if I do throw the questions around a bit. I'll just tell you what the situation is. We have the Slido, and I hope that those of you who were able to scan the Slido can still use that to help you to pose your questions if you want. I've got a set of questions that have come through, and I will pass them to the panelists a bit separately. I'll ask the panelists to be quite brief when you answer, then that gives me a chance to be naughty and come with a second question, but they'll be nice ones, I promise. And so the first question is, what are the possible ways of making aquaculture more sustainable? I thought I'd start with you, Rosamund, if you don't mind, to just give us your view on what sustainable aquaculture might be. And then if anybody else in the panel wants to pick up, then just make a signal to me and we'll make sure that you can join the discourse on this rather important question about the sustainability of aquaculture. Rosamund.
Yeah, thanks, David. Well, when I look at aquaculture in the oceans, I want to focus on finfish because it's the most edible weight. And the feed issue that Giles mentioned is really important, but I would argue actually there's been an amazing progress, not just in substitutions to other feeds, but the fish meal, fish oil component in feeds now is at least half made up of processing wastes from other fisheries. So we're getting this great circular economy in play, and it's due to market forces. It's due to the fact prices are high for fish meal relative to alternatives, and that is due to some of the governance issues of regulating the forage fish so that they're not overcaught.
What do you feel about the insect protein, maggots and so on?
Yeah, I think it's an exciting. I think it's an exciting area. It's difficult to scale up. It's often targeted to poor populations where they actually don't have the infrastructure to scale up in an economically viable way. But I think if you can get the economics and the scaling right over time, it's got great potential.
Okay, Charles, you come in now.
Look, one thing I just wanted to add into the mix is that we'll certainly need to see a diversification of feed sources if we want to get the volumes of increase that we want. And it's really interesting when you find a good innovation that works, and it's across all sectors, not just marine. What you can often do is establish that it works in nutrition terms, and it works on paper economically if you can get to the scale. But the great obstacle is getting from the proven concept to sufficient scale to replace the existing highly efficient system. And something like omega-3 oil from seaweed, you know, may well prove to be truly scalable, but at the moment it's still more expensive. It definitely will be cheaper. So this is a win-win for everybody if we can take it to scale. But you know, we need to think as bodies and sometimes as funding organizations about how do we bridge that gap from proven to really economically scalable to support that kind of change, which benefits everybody happening more quickly.
So I'm going to go to the other two panelists as well. It's such an important issue. Alden, FAO point of view on going from the proven tech to actually working at scale on sustainability of aquaculture.
Well, I can only agree with what has been said before. The huge potential of aquaculture, which also includes seaweed and algae and plants. So I'm glad that Giles mentioned that also as part of feed. The annual production today is more than 30 million tons of seaweed from the ocean, and that is something that we tend to forget a little bit in the overall context. And that is very, very important as a food component. Not all over the world, but certainly in Asia and more also in other parts of the world. So seaweed in the future is part of the solution. In FAO, we have a number of programs and developments going on that will assist member countries members of FAO in developing aquaculture further. We have under development through the dedicated subcommittee on aquaculture, for example, best practice guidelines on aquaculture, which will help producers all over the world face some of these challenges. So I don't think there's one solution. There are a number of tools in our joint toolbox that will help us progress.
Great. And Shakuntala, from your World Fish perspective, if you did need to come out with one policy recommendation on sustainable agriculture going to scale, would you have one?
Yes, David. And yes, I would. And I would like to see that the aquaculture and aquaculture production takes on a nutrition sensitive approach and a food systems approach. Our entry point can be aquaculture, but we should look at the landscape, at both the land and water landscape, so that our production systems are holistic and cohesive and not just focus on aquaculture or the production of just few foods.
Thanks a lot for introducing the systems approach. I'm going to dive in now with the next question, going to Giles, if you don't mind. It's a really precise question: how to help keep illegal seafood out of the market. Have you got one or two things that all of us can take on board? And if other colleagues want to unmute and jump in after Giles has spoken, don't hang around and wait for me. Just let's see whether you agree with him. Giles, please.
Look, I suspect you're going to get more insightful responses, David, from some of the others here. Look, from a retailer point of view, we're relatively lucky in Tesco to have a relatively strong expertise. But for most retailers, you know, you look to schemes set up by experts who are there. For us, the Marine Stewardship Council is a pretty effective thing. It's very straightforward for retailers to get their head around. You have some other schemes in place, but you know, we're committed as Tesco to building up our expertise in this area, because it's still quite a complex world to navigate. The more it can be made simple by recognized schemes built by experts, the more that we can simply use those as retailers and get more consistent in our offer to customers.
Very good. Rosamund, please.
Yeah, I'm coming from the Silicon Valley, so I think of technology, and there are great tracking technologies now. So illegal fishing, it's like remote sensing and deforestation. You can run, but you can't hide. So now what's on the table is a tracking of who's doing what, and the governance systems need to engage in a database, scientifically evidence of who's doing what, and then resolve it. It's very different than pointing fingers without that scientific evidence.
I really feel that this is one area where tech is going to help hugely. Alden, please.
Yeah, well, it happens so to be that on Saturday, 6th of June, it's the International Day for the fight against overfishing. So this is very timely. And in fact, in FIO on Friday, we have a special event on how to fight overfishing. I'd like to mention one improvement in policy tools, which is the Port State Measures Agreement, which gives new powers to port states to regulate and make sure that boats coming into the port have legal fishing operations behind them, and that the fish that is landed has been caught legally. So there are a number of new instruments, together with satellite controls, a number of other traceability tools that enable us to fight this much more efficiently than just a few years ago.
I'm super pleased to hear that. I'm going to now go to Shakuntala. It's a systems question for you. You know, so much of work on food systems has focused on food from land. How do you convert the land is to being aqua is? How do you get people to focus on food systems from ocean and other aquatic sources? Just a few tips in a very short time.
Well, and I was also going to make a point to your last to combine. So within agriculture, we've put quite a lot of focus on production systems and looking at production systems to give us the supplies of foods, more food, nutritious foods. I do think we should try to change this a bit around and put some more focus on consumers and disaggregate groups of consumers. So I would think, and there is some evidence of that if you would work with younger consumers, the youth, that you can change the kinds of demands you have for foods. And I don't think we have been doing enough of this to try to change the demands that both would benefit consumers, benefit their health and their nutritional status, and also benefit production systems and benefit the environment. So I do think there's a big block of work we can do there by getting consumers on board, giving them more knowledge and getting them more oriented to better supplies of foods.
Got it. She's winning all round. Wonderful. So we've got about 4 minutes left before I hand over to our next speaker. And I'm going to ask each of you if you could just give your 2 key priorities for advancing the sustainable production and consumption of fish from aquatic sources. Really looking, I want you to say post-COVID. I want you to think, how has your own thinking been influenced by COVID, and come out with a couple of priorities with a particular focus on blue food. So just looking to see whether or not there's horror or delight in your eyes. There, not too much horror. Yeah, it's quite interesting moderating on Zoom. I'm enjoying it a lot. Rosamund, how do you react with your 2, could be 2 priorities, but in a minute?
Yeah, I would say the first priority is really to build on the diversity that we have in our aquatic food system. We've got the freshwater, we've got the marine, we've got the aquaculture and the capture fisheries. But as I said, thousands of different fish species with so much information genetically and in terms of practices. And with COVID, we've seen a lot of food systems actually better off when they're more localized in scale and where producers and consumers are more tightly linked instead of very long supply chains. So diversification, the second one, I'll put a plug in for the blue food assessment. We need more scientific evidence to get the answers right. We can't rely on broad generalizations across environment, equity, nutrition, and so forth. And so building on the science will really help us get the nuance we need to move forward.
Thank you. Blue food assessment, BFA. We have to remember that and be looking out for it because it's such a big deal. Thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Shakuntala, right top of mind, especially post-COVID.
Thank you, David. There are two areas I would like to focus on. One is increasing supplies of diverse aquatic foods, and not just looking at production systems, but looking really into how we reduce waste and loss of aquatic foods. And the second point that I would make is there is quite a transformation taking place in the way people eat, the kinds of food they eat, and the manner in which they eat. And one great demand is for convenient, ready to eat, and easy to prepare foods. And we do have to ensure that aquatic foods are processed, are prepared in such a way that they meet the demands of the consumers. And again, I would like to focus on youth.
So you're really into tuning into taste here and saying that there is just a really growing taste for fish products. I hope when Giles comes just in a couple of seconds that we could see how he reacts to that as well. But Alden, your real priorities now, you've got this report coming out, you've got so much knowledge. What are the real top of mind things?
Well, I would say focus on science and science-based solutions in fisheries and aquaculture. Very often politics and political decisions are part of the context. So to focus even more on science and science-based solution, whether it's in aquaculture or in capture fisheries, I think that is fundamental for any improvement we want to see. Regarding the COVID and pandemic, I think it has shown how fragile, how fragmented our value chain is. But I think it has also shown the role of innovation, of technology, of new ways of working, and how this has accelerated change. So I think, as our Director General said, there can be fortune in misfortune. So I think it has shown again the role of science, of innovation and technology in the solution forward. Thank you.
That's nice. Thank you. Yeah, I really grateful to you for bringing out that point that Chudong Yu said. Thanks a lot. Giles, please.
Well, you asked a question, David, about sort of customers and young people. I mean, I think that fisheries, particularly aquaculture, offer the best bet of affordable, scalable animal protein for people everywhere and for a growing global population. In developed markets like the UK, relatively affluent, you see a lot of younger people moving away from more traditional diets, and seafood has a huge opportunity to be sustainable and desirable. You know, so the market potential here is enormous, but you've got to be very careful to fix the things that are wrong. I mean, we haven't really touched on the human rights at sea in this debate, but you know, there are deeply troubling accounts of so many fisheries and the way people are treated that needs to be addressed. And if I have three quick asks, you know, going from big to small, so many of the seas are sort of outside regulation. We do need a robust UN high seas treaty. Bringing it slightly more regionally, we have to have stronger, consistent regional fisheries management organizations and better collaboration to make sure that we're being really sustainable in our impacts and have a future for everybody. And then when I bring it down to, you know, what retailers can help drive, it is transparency that's already been mentioned. So for us, that has meant signing up to the Environmental Justice Foundation's Charter for Transparency. I think that drive for traceability and transparency coming from end users can help support the greater governance that we need globally.
Thank you very much indeed, Giles. What a brilliant panel. Big applause all round. You can deafen by it. But I just want to really underline one thing. Here is the man from the business sector saying, we need governance. We need a high seas treaty. We need regional fish management. We need transparency. Isn't that interesting? That it's the business people who are really saying it's so important. I mean, I'm just really accentuating that because I think it's so important. Look, everybody, this just shows how rich the area is. I could give you a big summary myself, but I won't do it anything like as well as the person who I'm about to introduce. We have now the honor of being able to introduce to you Dr. Agnes Kalibata, who is the Special Envoy of the United Nations Secretary General for his 2021 Food Systems Summit. And so to Dr. Kalibata, would you like to give us any reflections you have on what we've been talking about and any particular take-home messages you have for our audience of more than 150? So brilliant opportunity. Dr. Kalibata, you have the floor.
Thank you, David. But I can't see my video. Is there a challenge here? I can't see my video. If you can't see me, it's not because I don't want you to see me. Okay, I just saw something. Good.
Great.
Very good. Good to see you, David, and thank you all for inviting me to this meeting. I just really wanted to spend a minute to thank the Special Envoy for the Ocean Summit, who really took time to invite me to make sure that I was part of this. And I say that for a number of reasons. I was honestly a little bit, it was unfortunate that we could not have the Ocean Summit because us from the Food Systems Dialogue, we are so much looking forward to the Ocean Summit for the very reasons you all had. Everybody, there are so many solutions that are part of feeding the world that would come from the Food Systems Summit. And you had that, whether it is from the presentation or the messages from the Prime Minister of Bangladesh or from what the FAO Director General said. There's so much opportunity that we see. But also the panel here highlighted a very good areas that we could all work on and we could collaborate on. But I wanted just to highlight the part that kept on emphasizing, I think it was Roseman who was saying that the science that needs to come to the Food Systems Summit and how that would be helpful. But so was the overlap that was being mentioned around how the Food System Summit has good overlaps with the Ocean Summit and how we can take advantage of that. So I really think that the panelists brought out a whole number of issues, and I don't want to go through all of them, but I just wanted to highlight the opportunities that I see from where I'm sitting, in addition to what the panelists have told you, just to make sure that I'm not repeating many of the things they said. Well, at the beginning of this year, I had an opportunity to be in the Arctic. I was to travel to the Arctic, and again, for that part of the world, the ocean is a major part of how they live or their livelihoods. I was really saddened to see that, and we already know that temperatures in that part of the world are increasing so fast that actually it is threatening their livelihoods and their source of food. So we already know that. But even away from that, the warmings of the oceans here around East Africa is part of the reason we have a lot of havoc happening from a climate change perspective. And really that is creating challenges with how we feed our people in this part of the world. So the opportunity here for the Food System Summit versus the Ocean Summit, and why I was a little bit sad to see the Ocean Summit being postponed. I was hoping that there are some critical action that would come from the Ocean Summit that would be part of feeding into the Food System Summit, so that we can just take them on board and be part of what we take on as we go into the Food System Summit. And there are a number of other summits that are like that we are looking forward to just say, bring it on, and we build it into what we are doing. That said, we are still definitely going to be working with you, and we'll be looking forward to this. The Food System Summit, as part of the rest of the calls to action that have happened during this decade ahead of the SDGs, will focus on really ensuring that we come through on the 2030 SDGs on critical areas that are important to the Food System Summit. And I'm going to mention a few. Definitely the question of zero hunger is one of the areas that we'll focus on. And you all, from an ocean's perspective, have been providing opportunities for how we can improve food. The question of reducing waste is one of the things we'll focus on as well. And we still know that a lot of food from the ocean is wasted. There's an opportunity there to ensure that that food is saved as well. We have major nutritional challenges and a lot of solutions around that come from the oceans. And we know that that is probably, that is the source of some of the healthiest food that we are looking at. But also a lot of you mentioned during the meeting, and kept going back to the issue of biodiversity, even for the oceans to give us what we are looking for, the emphasis on diversity kept coming back. And if we don't look at the cost of food and how we produce food and how we impact our food system, the areas from which we extract food, it will be a very serious challenge. The last point I wanted to make, and which really relates to one of the meetings I was sitting in, I was, just before I came to this meeting, I was sitting in a meeting with youth, and the question they were asking is, even as we move to oceans and think through protecting our environment and all that, how do we ensure livelihoods protection for indigenous people that live on these sources of food? So as the food system will put all those things in perspective, the environment, the indigenous people's sources of food and livelihoods, the ability to feed a world that is increasing in population, and the fact that we are doing it against climate change. These are all things we cannot be able to do unless we have strong partnerships with different institutions, including the institutions that are looking at the work that is going on in the Ocean Summit. So basically, my message to you is very simple. We welcome the work that is being looked at through the science that was mentioned earlier. We welcome that to be part of the scientific work that is going to inform the Food System Summit. We have a very, very protracted and intense dialogues that will happen at country level. And David, you probably know about those dialogues already. Those dialogues are going to be very critical to getting the level of commitments that we need from these countries. I know my time is running short. So we encourage you to be part of what we are doing with the Food System Summit. We are open. We do recognize that the aquatic foods contribute food for over 3 billion people in this world. And we welcome your support, your contribution, your engagement, and we look forward to working with you as we go forward and start the launch of the different perspectives of the Food Systems Summit. Thank you, David, for your patience. I see you're trying to be patient with me.
How cool, how lovely that you were here, that you were able to share your reflections and show that you are bringing all this work on blue food into the summit process. So I'm allowed to give you 1 minute of my reflections on what I've heard. And just to start straight away, this has been absolutely brilliant, from the first 2 opening vids through to the 4 panelists, then to Dr. Kalibata, just really a richness that you very rarely get. But what beautiful thing it's been. I know you've all got only 15 minutes before the next session, but here are my 4 words. Science, the importance of science, the importance of this blue food assessment, looking at potential opportunity and impact. Science matters. Number 2, solutions, the potential for technology and transparency and reducing waste and finding new pathways. Just so many solutions are there. Thirdly, systems. Let's take a systems approach to everything aquatic, whether it's about diversity or about resilience or about the role of the consumer in the whole process. If we take a systems approach, it really comes to life so much more. And then fourthly, security. It's an interesting word here, security. I thought, well, we're talking about food and nutrition security. We're talking about livelihood security. And then we're talking about the security that comes through good governance, security in the high seas, regional fish management, and the rights of people who work in fishing. There is a lot of security questions there that only can be dealt with through cooperation and a focus on governance. So those are my words: science, solutions, systems, and security, turned on by all of you and the wonderful panel that we've had. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, I would like to thank the audience, all of you. You've stayed on right through. What dedication. And secondly, I'd like to thank all the wonderful people behind this. A lot of preparation went into it. I could name people, but I'm nervous of doing that. I've just seen Kristen Telecki on my screen here smiling at me. I think he's just a photograph of him, but anyway, thank you. Jim Lee, but also the team from the World Economic Forum and all the different groups that are involved in it. It's a hard, strong lift that they're doing to get blue food onto the global agenda, but it's worth it. And then I'd like to remind you that the deep dives start at 18:30. So thank you with that. I think we're getting something here to explain precisely what you've got to do. And with that, I think we're at time. So can you just really express huge gratitude to everybody? I'm going to do it just clapping in my office. Thank you very much indeed. Have a good rest of the day. Wonderful to be with you all. Bye-bye.